I believe God does exist. And so if God exists, there's a whole line of logic and reason in terms of then how we think, feel, what we do, why we do it. So sport, how is sport any different than anything else in life? It's just some other thing that human beings do. And then what should be the foundation and basis of it? Well, it should start off with, if God exists, then that should somehow be at the core foundation of my understanding of this thing that we're going to call sport. Yeah. It's not the only thing, and that's sometimes the problem in sport, is that we'll see people after a game kneel down and, in a circle, hold hands and pray. And that's great. But if during the game I'm cursing at you or trying to take out your knee or I'm angry at you or whatever it might be, there's a little disconnect there for me. So the point being, how, again, we're whole people, body, mind, and souls, that are doing these things all at that instant of a moment. What does that mean? So when I talk about divine providence, it's not some kind of punting, no pun intended, to get us away from sport. It's to say it's the essence of sport. I mean, we were made to play. I find that fascinating.
All right, talk about play. You have a whole kind of theory on play.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Because you think of play as just like little kids running around, but what is play?
Well, God made us to play. It's quite remarkable. From the beginning of time, you go back to the earliest man, people have played. And what's interesting is in earlier man, play and religion were very closely aligned. There were a lot of rituals and things that were very similar to play. But you could ask, what is play? Play, when it's done as it ought to be, not for some purpose, like meaning I'm doing it to make money, or I'm doing it for to get a clap on the back or whatever trophy. Play for its own sake is very much like wisdom. We're called to it. Wisdom's in Proverbs says, "I played before God. God was my delight. I played before God day after day." This thing called play is something we've actually been made for. If you look at philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all had something to say about play and about sport. And to not confuse the two, people think that sport and play are two different things. Sport is the competitive form of play. There's different kinds of play. There's risk-related things. There's roller coasters. Those are all considered forms of play. But sport is the competitive form of play. So winning and losing, by the way, makes a difference. The idea that we can do sport and it really doesn't count whether we win or lose, then that's not sport. That's something else. So the competitive part of the game is actually an important part. It's the essence of that competitive form of play. So we're made to play. So what does that mean? Again, look at Scripture. St. Paul refers to it in 1 Corinthians. He talks about, running the race, the boxing. He gives different analogies. Why was he doing that? Because Paul was from Tarsus. And in Tarsus was a palestra. And in those days, that would have been called, in our days, an Olympic training center. So he knew all the people listening to him would completely understand. Isn't that a non-surprising thing? We could say the same thing today. Sport is a powerful means for communicating the purpose of life of each person in relationship with God. It's a powerful purpose if it's used properly, if it's directed properly.
Do you remember how Aristotle said, and I think Father Shaw wrote about this.
He was great.
Yeah, but he said that when we watch as spectators, when we watch sports and we kind of get lost in that moment,
yes,
that's actually the highest, that's as close as most people get to contemplation.
That's right. Isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I wrote about it in my Aristotle book about, watching one of the World Series where there was this incredible situation and my kid, Aiden, who's now 23, but when he was a little boy, and we're on pins and needles, it's midnight.
Yeah.
It's a lot of extra innings in the World Series. And you could hear a pen drop, time stand still, all those kind of things we say.
Right.
We're sitting here staring, and I'm looking at him. I pull myself out of the moment enough to look at him, and he's just locked in.
Yeah.
And then when a home run is hit and the guy runs around and they win the World Series, it was the Cardinals. When that happens, you see the way this little boy lit up, and I see what Aristotle was talking about.
Right.
It was as close to contemplation of a higher good that most people would never.
So the problem is not play or sport, and I think in today's world we tend to think the problem is sport. Sport is bad. It's like, no, play and sport were made for. how we do it, how we conduct it. And by the way, we're big in today's world of changing the meaning of words.
Yeah.
So when we say pro football player plays, he's a pro football player and he plays football, could be argued. He's actually an employee. I mean, he actually works for a living, and his living is actually doing this thing on a field, moving a ball up and down the field. I mean,
yeah.
So it can lose it. And by the way, that's why many players struggle, because they actually stop playing. So even if they're paying you, you gotta almost pretend you're not being paid. You gotta just go back to the essence of why you did it to begin with, and the joy you had in doing it, and that contemplation.
Meaning it's an end in itself versus a utility to another end of making money.
Yeah.
Now, what about I don't know why this came to my mind now, but we've talked a little bit in the past about this craze, this obsession with families in the last 20 years, 30 years, more than any time in history, of really young kids getting in highly competitive sports. I'll never forget, I was going on a run one morning with a group of guys doing F3.
Yeah.
And we're running, and this guy's telling me about his daughter's training regimen, and she has soccer practice, but then she also has agility training every day, and she was going to a soccer training camp in the summer, and he's going through all of this, and I'm like, well, where's your daughter in high school? Because I was like, I thought she was going to be trying to get into college. Oh no, she's 9. Right. And I'm like, what? So, but people do this, Bill.
Absolutely.
Right? And so talk about that. I mean, is that, A, is it healthy? And B, is it even necessary? Because don't a lot of these things wash out in the end?
Yes.
And like, if you start playing as a teenager, you're going to make up,
right,
like John Landy there, you're going to circle the track and catch up to everybody very, very quickly. Talk about that, because kids get real obsessive, or parents get obsessive really young.
Right. Well, now we could get really deep and say, first, you almost need to address marriage and the family. Because if marriage and the family is off in any way, everything built on top of it's going to be off in some way. So sport in particular, I think what starts to happen is parents are either seeing it as a way for their child to get a scholarship to college, or they just want to see them be a superstar, in some way. And so you hear the phrase, living vicariously through your children.
I've seen it, man. We lived a lot of years on the Little League baseball field.
I think you see it a lot in Little League baseball in particular.
Oh, my gosh. And Dad's standing back there behind the stop and
It's a slow game, and so you have tons of time for people to be yelling things out.
But you know what I've noticed? It's actually the dads that were never very good athletes themselves that are the loudest.
Right.
The ones who are really good are chill.
Right.
That shows us that the insecurity is just apparent.
Or you've had your experience, it was a good one, and now you can let somebody else have theirs. It doesn't have to be about you in some ways. But again, we're in a culture today where then we're led to believe that, well, if my child has this maybe talent for this, I'm obligated as a parent, aren't I, to do everything I can, to tap that out? And they're doing that with no understanding of physiology or anything else. So to your point, every pro football player I've worked with is a unique human being made by God. Like, you are not getting into the NFL if you are not a unique human being. Kyle Brady, who I worked with, tight end, played. He was drafted in the first round, number 9, I think. Went to the Jets, then he was with Jaguars, and then finished his career last year in New England in the Super Bowl. Kyle was 6'7", 285, had like a 35-inch waist, could run a 4.5 40. I mean, his neck connected to his shoulders. He was like, to your point earlier, almost felt like inhumanly strong. Like, I mean, he just was incredibly strong guy. If you saw Kyle, you just would have to look and say, wow, this is like God doing a work of art here. Right. I mean, this is, God made this one unique human being. And that's like what you see.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.